Top of the morning, Dan and Amy. So tomorrow is the all-important Georgia Senate runoff elections. Tonight, President Trump will be in Georgia rallying Trump supporters to ensure that they vote tomorrow because it looks to be a turnout game. I mean, the scuttlebutt has been that the RNC is very confident that David Perdue is going to win, and they easily was the adverb that I heard. And that Kelly Loeffler is also up a bit on Warnock. That doesn't really comport with the most recent Trafalgar polling I've seen, which has it statistically a dead heat. And I mean, 50-49 type dead heat. And
Senator Perdue, he's still in self-quarantine, after one of his campaign workers tested positive for COVID. So that can't help if you're not out, pressing the flesh.
Well, so Trump will make it unequivocal, as he did a couple of weeks ago, that people need to get out and support Perdue and Loeffler and put them over the top so that Republicans retain control of the Senate. But I wonder how the coverage of the conversation between Trump and his legal team and Georgia Secretary of State Brad Raffensperger and his legal team over the weekend will be received and how it will impact the election amid all the calls from political sophists like our own Sack of Durbin to suggest that Trump's admonishments of Raffensperger to examine the areas where the Trump campaign has identified votes that shouldn't be counted, election irregularities, fraud, if you will, that it amounts to criminal activity, a criminal solicitation to commit election fraud is what, of course, the left is trying to spin from this comment that Trump made during their hour-long conversation.
The people of Georgia are angry. And these numbers are going to be repeated on Monday night, along with others that we're going to have by that time, which are much more substantial even. And the people of Georgia are angry. The people of the country are angry. And there's nothing wrong with saying that, that you've recalculated.
Well, Mr. President, the challenge that you have is the data you have is wrong.
Look, all I want to do is this. I just want to find 11,780 votes, which is one more than we have, because we won the state.
And that is being interpreted, of course, in the worst possible way, like the "do me a favor" line in the Zelensky call that led to the House Democrats impeaching Trump, being interpreted as some, again, solicitation, criminal activity, and blackmail, and so on and so forth. When in point of fact, and by the way, this is included in Fox News reporting at the top of our hour, which was a terrible report. I don't know which report. That's ridiculous. She misunderstands it, just as the Democrats are purposely misunderstanding it, that Trump is suggesting somehow, we lost by 12,000 votes, so now you need to find 12,000 votes. That's not what he was saying. If you look at the transcript or listen to the entire conversation leaked to the Washington Post, you hear him going through, over the course of that hour, specific batches of votes that they believe were counted improperly, whether it is people who died and there's a dispute about how many people dead voted, whether it's people who moved out of state and there's a dispute about that, whether there's people who didn't properly sign the absentee ballot application, and so on and so forth. He talked in that same hour-long conversation. Trump said, basically, I think I won Georgia by 500,000 votes. So what he's saying is, all I need is 12,000 from the hundreds of thousands I actually won the state by. You don't need to do the whole thing. Just look at a few categories of what I'm saying, and you'll find what we found, what our election experts found, what those who audited our findings found. And just to point this out from the attorneys, because this won't be covered anywhere else, maybe by some of our colleagues on Salem, but certainly not by the D.C. press corps. Cleta Mitchell, who, as I've said before and will say again, you've heard her on this show, is one of the preeminent election attorneys in D.C., quoting her to the Raffensperger and his team, "You have data and records that we don't have access to. And you keep telling us and making public statements that you investigated this and nothing to see here. But we don't know about that. All we know is what you tell us." Then her colleague, also a Trump campaign attorney, Kurt Hilbert, goes on to say, look, quote, "just 4 categories that have already been mentioned by the president that have actually hard numbers of 24,149 votes that were counted illegally. That in and of itself is sufficient to change the results or place the outcome in doubt. We would like to sit down with your office and we can go And we can do it through purposes of compromise, and just like this phone call, just to deal with that limited category of votes. And if you're able to establish that our numbers are not accurate, then fine. So all of this bluster surrounding this conversation because of the way Trump talks, and if you actually drill down to what his legal representatives are saying, that's what you get from Cleta Mitchell and Kurt Hilbert. But how will this play, all of this play, and what can we expect tomorrow with so much hanging in the balance? And
the battle for America.
It really is basically that. For more on this, we'll get some local expertise. We're pleased to be joined by Janelle King. She's the co-founder of Speak Georgia, and she's also the former deputy state director for the Georgia Republican Party. Janelle, thanks for joining us. Appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you for having me. I'm happy to be here.
So how are Georgia Republicans receiving this latest contretemps over the Trump Raffensperger call?
What's so funny is that I don't think I've talked to one Republican about it because we're all numb to the Democrat hit pieces. I think at this point, they have taken the entire 4 years that the president was in office and made it about him, doing things that we know he wasn't doing, and just kind of highlighting information and highlighting stuff to create distractions. And so we're pretty much numb to it. With this call here, I'm not surprised that the Democrats are taking it and trying to spin it in a way that makes it look like the president is doing something criminal, when in fact everything he said in that call is something that he tweeted out at least once before. So there was nothing there, and we're not even talking about it or addressing it. Right now, we're focused on the Senate race, and the Senate race is the only thing we're focused on because what we know is that our country is at stake. And if we do not make a decision and make the right decision to support Senator Loeffler and Senator David Perdue tomorrow, then we are handing this country over to the Democratic Party.
Well, go ahead.
What is the state of affairs, though, with the local Republican Party? Because that matters. And I just Trump referring to himself in that same call as a schmuck for supporting Brian Kemp. Obviously, we know what his opinion of Republican Secretary of State Brad Raffensperger is and the job that both of them have done. I'm not nearly as hard on Kemp as the president is wont to be, but does that have a depressive effect at all, do you think, in terms of turnout, the squabbling going on between Trump and particularly Kemp?
I hope not. What I'm thinking, though, is that, there are a lot of Republicans who feel a certain type of way, whether they support the president or Governor Kemp or like myself, support both of our leaders. However, I do know that one thing we all believe and we all understand is that this race is important. And so I truly believe that people are going to turn out to vote and they're going to show up on Election Day and we're going to bring this home. However, I do know that, like all families fight sometimes, and there's disagreement. And one thing this shows is that when the Democratic Party tries to paint a picture that we are all walking in lockstep with the president or lockstep with whoever our leaders are, no, we are independent thinkers and we have these discussions. That's where disagreement comes from. But at the end of the day, we all can share. We all want election integrity, and we want to feel like our vote is free and that it's taken and done fairly. And so that's something that's universal. And so how we get there may differ, but we definitely have the same end goal, and I believe that's going to be reflected tomorrow.
So Stacey Abrams was on This Week with Martha Raddatz, and she said the Democrats in Georgia, the DNC, they've registered 65,000 voters, people under the age of 29, people of color who did not vote in the general election. What has the Republican Party done in Georgia to get people registered to vote?
So we are always registering people to vote. I know that our governor now, former Secretary of State, Governor Kemp, put in place a process where once you get your driver's license, you're automatically enrolled. And so that also plays into that. And you have to keep in mind that some of these voters are under the age of 18 that Stacey Abrams is referring to. So she can put these numbers out there all day long, but the real number that matters is how many of them can actually vote. And so we are definitely, pushing our own efforts as well. I do feel that is a area that the Republican Party can definitely strengthen going forward. But we are excited about what's happening. Again, Stacey Abrams is definitely doing all that she can do. I'm not convinced or I'm not impressed, to be honest, with her actions because some of her strategies seem to be beyond pandering and a little insulting, being that Georgia holds the most business, African Americans and business-driven and successful minorities in the country are right here. Yet some of their ads pander to this mindset that all African Americans are struggling and just need a handout, and that's not the case. So her efforts are not impressive on my part.
Well, what is happening in Georgia then? Is it just the nature of all of this change in election protocols and the drop boxes and so forth? Because it is remarkable. It's one thing for Georgia to be close. It's another thing for Warnock and Ossoff, who are so far left, in addition to all of their infirmities. Warnock has personality, and Ossoff has Chinese ties, Chinese communist ties. Remarkable that they could be in statistical dead heats with the two incumbents, isn't it?
It is, and the thing is, though, the Democrats who are voting in this race and voting for those candidates are not necessarily voting for Ossoff and Warnock. They're voting for Stacey Abrams, and they're voting for Joe Biden and Kamala Harris and everyone else who has been able to propagandize them into thinking that this is what's best for them. It's not a situation where we have two candidates on the left that are strong candidates, and we knew that from the very beginning, and I believe that that's going to be their downfall. The Democratic Party has, to me, in my opinion, hasn't done a good job at picking good candidates in a very long time. So, but what they did do was create this referendum against the president, and then they created this notion and this perception and narrative that all Republicans are racist and that all Republicans simply want to, destroy your life, when in fact that is their strategy and their narrative that they have. And so more than anything else, what I'm seeing is, like I said, the referendum on the president and the referendum on the Republican Party as a whole. And then they are getting more and more people out to vote that doesn't typically vote due to their increased efforts. And when you can raise $100 million in 3 months, there's a lot that you can do as far as spreading messaging, whether it be true or false.
So what happens tomorrow? Because the early voting I saw, or the voting numbers I saw last week, suggest that the turnout was better for Democrats than it was in advance of the November 3rd election. Now, again, you can only read so much into early voting numbers, but it does suggest that a big Election Day turnout is necessary for Perdue and Loeffler.
That is actually the position that we're used to being in. Going back in other races, we typically show up on Election Day. And so I would rather be in this position where I see that, in my opinion, I think around 80% of Democrats have already, cast their vote. So we kind of know where they stand. So this now leaves the ball in our court. And it's really up to Republicans to get out the vote. And that's it. There's no other way that we can lose this other than not showing up. And so, I think that's a good position to be in. It's tricky and it's risky, of course, but it's definitely the best position to be in at this time.
Well, 3 million people have already voted early. Are you confident that there won't be any voter fraud? I mean, considering the fact that 1,700 Georgians voted twice, they mailed in their ballots and then went to, the polling places on Election Day, and nothing's happened to them. They haven't been arrested or charged with any voter fraud. But are you confident that this will be an honest election?
I'm hopeful that it will be an honest election, and I'm hopeful that, I know that both senators have put a lot of energy and a lot of effort into making sure that they have people on the ground who are watching this process very closely. We have to keep in mind that we know better now than what we did in November. And so there are definitely new strategies being implemented. So I would hope the Democratic Party wouldn't cheat this go round. But should they, I am confident that we are putting forth our best effort to catch it and to be ahead of it.
Well, I'm sorry to interrupt, but what is new for tomorrow that wasn't in place for November 3rd?
Well, I know there was a lot of talk about poll workers, and we personally have 8,000 poll watchers that are already being deployed to go out and watch these days, which is more than what we had in November. So we definitely increased that. Our poll watchers are now on high alert because of everything that's happened. I think that also created an education towards our poll watchers and our attorneys to be able to look for smaller things that they may not have noticed in the first go round. So I do feel hopeful about that. But most importantly, there is no argument if we don't show up. So not voting is not an option. And I believe that as long as we show up and we go ahead and we press those numbers, I think we'll be fine. One of the things I looked at is I know we are down by I think we're down by about a little over 20% in turnout overall than in November. And then the mail-in ballots, which is where we saw most of the fraud, is also down about 20%. So if we look at it from that perspective, if they did cheat in the same way that we believe they did beforehand, it would take almost twice the effort to do so. And I'm pretty sure that we're in place to be able to catch that.
What about, like, Andrew Yang encouraged people to move to Georgia temporarily? You know, if you can work from home, just move to Georgia, live there, establish residency, and then vote in the election. Is anybody checking that?
Absolutely. So when that first happened, I do know, and I will give our SOS credit for that, is that they did jump on that fairly quickly. They made it very clear that they are watching all of these new registrants, and that if you are found to have moved here simply to vote, that you will be federally prosecuted. I'm prosecuted with a felony. And so I know that has went out. And then I personally had people messaging me that was getting letters from some of these organizations that were outside of the state that were encouraging people to go online and register to vote. And that one of my friends received a letter from someone who had passed away in Alabama, and we jumped on that fairly quickly. And then I also know that that the SOS office has been investigating a lot of these nonprofit organizations that are coming from outside of the state as well, that's encouraging people to operate in irregularities. So I think that we are in a good position.
Well, Andrew Yang, if he gets a felony conviction, that'll help him run for mayor of New York City. So we'll have to see how that plays out. Janelle King, co-founder of Speak Georgia, former deputy state director for the Georgia Republican Party. Janelle, thanks for joining us. Appreciate it.
Thank you so much. Thank you for having me.
Yep, and she joined us on our turnkey.pro answer line.
The more you listen, the more you'll know. This is Chicago's Morning Answer. Morning Answer on AM 560. The Answer.
2020 is finally winding down. Get a jump start on the new year by finally losing that COVID weight. NJ Diet's scientific approach will ensure that you lose that fat quickly and safely. NJ Diet uses your hair and saliva samples along with their bioenergetic scans to personalize natural solutions and supplements that balance your hormones, where the side effect is weight loss. With NJ Diet, you will shed a contractually guaranteed 20 to 50 plus pounds in only 40 days. Then NJ Diet utilizes DNA testing to determine your ideal diet, workout regimen, and specific needs for essential vitamins so you can keep the weight off. NJ Diet is all natural, no shots, no hormones, and no surgery. Full supervision is provided every step of the way, and you even get the doctor's personal email